Welcome to the Intimacy Lab. I'm Michelle Renee, an intimacy guide, surrogate partner, and professional cuddler. We're here to talk about intimacy in a much broader view than what you probably think. Most people think about intimacy as sex. We're going to break that apart here. Welcome to the lab. Hello, welcome back to the Intimacy Lab. I thought I was done recording season 2. And then I was talking with my client, Judy, and we decided to record one last one for season 2. So I think I love working with Judy, and I wanted this story to go on this season before season 3 is going to be different. I've already decided season 3 is going to be focused on guests that are local to Southern California. And so I needed to do this now because I don't want to wait for season 4 to have to roll back around to this story. So, Judy, do you want to do an introduction?
Sure. My name's Judy, and Michelle's amazing. I've been working with her for about a year now and seen tremendous healing and quality of life I never dreamed possible. And so by profession, I am a college professor, and I also do a lot of business consulting and public speaking, and I'm excited for this opportunity.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to even think about having an active client of mine talking about the work. Like, I question sometimes, like, is this okay? You know, I think a question that often comes up when we talk about our work and we talk about our clients talking about the work is like, can you consent to talking about it? You know, like informed consent. Do you know what you're consenting to? Yeah. And you know, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I think that's really important, personally and on the professional side, because I think it's important to understand the scope of things, right?
Yeah.
And what consent really means. Like learning about consent and growing in it over the past year and a half has been really significant for me, to listen to my yeses and my nos. And I think in every phrase and every stage, I know when working with my therapist, the consent leads way, I think, to more honest and vulnerability because I know what's going on in the scope of things.
Yeah, sometimes people ask if we can, like, there's always somebody trying to push a documentary or something about this work because it's powerful work, and I understand why they want to tell the stories. But too often they're trying to tell the story from the beginning, and the client not knowing what's going to come for them in the work, I just don't think can actually consent to having that story told in a public way when they don't know what they're walking into.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, little background. I met Judy, almost a year ago now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be a year, July. So I called you in June and then physically met in July.
Yeah. So we met, we got to cuddle. And, you know, I don't know if you had any idea at that time where our work would go together, but I didn't.
No.
I thought I was getting the opportunity to cuddle with someone who knew more about me than I knew about you. Right? Like,
yes.
Judy had found me online and was coming out to San Diego and scheduled a time to cuddle. And it was great. In our intake call, I learned a lot, and I was so excited to meet you. And then it just kind of turned into this really, wild. I don't even know how to describe it.
The intake call was so powerful and significant because even when I got on the call, I didn't have a script or preparation. My heart was just open, you know, to go where it was to go. And it was amazing to feel that level of vulnerability and comfortable with you from the hello, you know what I mean? And a little bit about like, I'm not a stalker. This is how I know you. And just a profound experience to take those steps.
Well, thankfully, I'm pretty used to people coming to me and knowing a lot more about me. Yeah. Like I remember going to Sex Geek summer camp in 2015, and I already had a blog at that time called Sex After Marriage, and it was kind of a living diary of my explorations post-divorce in polyamory and kink and BDSM, and And I went to camp, and this guy comes up to me and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I know so much about you because I've been reading your blog." And that was like my first experience of having that kind of inequality in information a little bit. But I got really used to it. I think I remember the best part was he said, "Wow, you're just like you write."
Yes.
And I was like,
you really are. I would
so
second.
Great.
The
Yeah, I think
comes through.
There's not I don't think I have like a professional persona. Like I know people that have a professional persona and teach his own. I don't know how to do that. Maybe I don't know.
I don't either. Either.
Yeah, I want to put a content warning before we get too deep into this. My guess is we're going to end up talking a little bit about your history. I mean, we're going to follow your lead. Okay. But before we get too deep into it, I want to warn people that are listening that we're probably going to talk about childhood sexual assault, or at least know it's going to be in the room. It's in the history. I don't know that we have to get into details, but it's part of our work.
Absolutely.
And I don't know what else is going to come up. I guess I added a content warning to the front of the episode I put out this morning because I realized talking about weight can be really hard for people, and talking about cancer can be really hard for people. And so good news. If we touch on anything else that we think we need to put a little bit of a warning around, we can do that later. But where do we start? I think we're going to start with a card.
There you go.
Let's stay on path. This is how we always run the show. And I know that will take us on an interesting journey. It's pretty foolproof. Okay. What's something you can say no to this week to prioritize your mental health? And what's something that you can say yes to?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, I would say for me, is I'm invited to a picnic, and it started out as maybe 5 or 6 of us, and then other people invited other people, and it's going to be a much bigger event. And I'm pretty extroverted, but the no for me would be, I'm going to drive myself instead of go with friends like I initially planned, just so I'm able to leave when I feel like leaving. I'll either be excited and engaged or like done. So because of being with people all week long, engaging all week long, sometimes on the weekend, either tapping out, especially if it's depending on lighthearted and fun versus conversations, it's like beautiful, but too much right now.
And you don't know when that's going to hit.
Exactly right.
Right. Capacity is something. I went to lunch with a somatic experiencing practitioner here in Escondido. And I mentioned the word capacity, and she said, "Do your clients know what that means?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a really good question." So listeners, capacity, how much can you take? Not to the point of tolerating, but how much can you, how long can you be present in a really willing and wanting way?
I think you and I have talked about that, just the container section, right? When the container feels full, it's like, okay, I'm good.
You can only take so much, especially when you're doing this kind of work.
Right. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just knowing yourself and listening. And it's beautiful, because then what's next when that container's full, I think it's just as beautiful.
You got to go home and digest.
Yes.
Right. I think. So one thing, Judy and I work together from long distance. So either I'm traveling towards Judy or Judy's traveling towards me, and figuring out the timing, how much can we do? And sometimes you've been able to have a good break in between our sessions where you can really have time to metabolize. And other times we have to kind of do one at night, do one in the morning, hope that 10 hours in between or something is enough to give a little breathing room, right? Not feel overwhelmed or push past our capacity.
Yes.
Yeah. Good night's sleep will do that, though.
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, journaling has been very helpful, and just sitting with it, even if I don't write something, just literally sitting with like feelings or thoughts that are coming up, or some memories that might come up. But I think feelings have been significant, to sit with those, and then the next day when we're together, just be honest. Okay, this is where I'm at,
I expect that second session to be a lot of processing time.
Yes.
Yeah. I think our last time we met together, that second session surprised me because I don't think we did as much processing as I thought we would do.
Yeah.
We like accidentally fell into some really big work.
Yes.
We thought the day before was a big day.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. No, I 1,000% agree on that one.
Yeah. What's something that I can say no to this week? I already did. I'm going to retrospect this real quick because I thought it was such a good place of modeling. So I'm an early to bed person. So I woke up Wednesday morning really early. I have a 6:00 in the morning meeting every Wednesday morning. And I woke up at 5:30 in the morning to a text from my son that he was a little distraught. Something he said kind of traumatic happened at work last night. Well, he had said tonight because he had sent it that night, but I was already sleeping. So as a mom, I'm like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. How do I rescue my son real quick before I have the 6:00 meeting? But he's still sleeping, even on, he's on the East Coast, but still, that's still pretty early for him. So I messaged him and said, hey, I have a meeting. And as soon as that meeting gets done, I'll give you a call. So I call him. And there was just there was a scare at work. Somebody with some mental health issues and a mental health crisis was pretty agitated. And the reports are that like a customer heard him threaten the store.
Wow.
And in the end that evening, he came back to the store and my son and his coworkers had to hide in the back room.
Wow.
And as a mom, thrilled that you're okay.
Yeah.
Also doing that whole whatever you do in those situations, you've got to take care of yourself. You can't worry about what's going to happen to the register. You can't worry about, you know what I mean? Like, and that's where his, first thoughts were, I don't want to get in trouble. Right. And as a mom, I'm like, I don't want you to lose your life.
Right.
Right. And so I did the whole, got to beef up the agency, let's beef up the agency. But then I realized what I really wanted to do was to make myself as available for him as I possibly could that next day. Excellent. Right. He called in sick to work. And I called in sick, basically. I canceled. I had a client that was in a bit of crisis that morning who was like, can I get a Zoom call with you today? And my first response was, yeah, can we do 10 o'clock? Even though knowing my brain, my mind was elsewhere.
Sure.
I knew I wasn't going to be able to focus. So then I changed my mind and I wrote back and I said, actually, I'm having a rough day today and I'm clearing my schedule and I'm not going to be able to see you. I'm taking care of myself. And she handled it well. Excellent. And it was almost like an excellent opportunity. I think sometimes with clients, we go through an interesting arc depending on what your background is. And when your background is kind of needing a lot of parenting, like this feeling of, when you're a kid and you need other people to help meet your needs.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't really grow out of that. Mm-hmm. We get a little stuck there. And so in the beginning, when I'm working with a client, I'm happy to meet a lot of those needs, right? You need the mirroring of how I see you, my support, my cheerleaderness, I've got you. This is, this is all good. And my job is to help you get better at doing that for yourself.
Absolutely.
My Instagram, I talk a lot about inner child work. Mm-hmm. And okay, you want to hear this thing from me, but what if you said that to yourself, to that inner child that really wants to hear me tell them that they're doing a good job or whatnot. And so, her response was really affirming that she was going to try to take care of herself.
Excellent.
And it felt so good. It felt like the best use of a struggle.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I did a really good job of modeling, putting my needs first.
Right.
Which is hard to do as a helper. I bet. We get into this work because we want to help people, and you're somebody who needs me, but I need to take care. It's like put on the oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
I canceled a lunch date that day with a therapist. We had a date. canceled that. I canceled a cuddle session. I knew that I wasn't going to be present with any of those things. I was going to be thinking about my son the whole time. Mm-hmm. And I needed to know that if he called, I could answer the phone.
Absolutely.
And I did that. He called a couple times and I was able to be there for him, even though I'm across the country.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah. So that's my no. That was where I used my no really well. But where's something that you can say yes to?
I've been intentionally working on like trying to meet new people in new circles. And so just Monday night I did that. I just said yes to go into this meetup that I had read about, heard about, been invited about for probably a year and a half. And I finally just got courageous and I said, yep, I'm going to do it. And I was supposed to be in this other group that night. And I said, not up to it. I had been online all day with my schoolwork. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And yes, I'm going to do this. And I did. And I surprised myself. I'll be honest with you. It was one of those, I had a very rough weekend last weekend. And it was like, I can't believe I'm going to go do this. But I felt in my gut that it was just what I needed to do. Just be with people I didn't even know, and just make some new friends. And we sat and played cards and it was just really chill. But that was a significant yes for me because typically it's like, no, you can't really do that. No, you need to rest, recover, walk, whatever. And I was like, no, I need to be with people, but not people I know and just meet some new folks. And then I could come and go as I please. So.
Yay. It's that
I'll
edge stuff.
Say yes to ice cream. I'll
always say yes to ice cream. Unless you have a tummy ache.
Frozen yogurt. And I'm like, if anybody calls, I'm going. I don't care.
I would say, unless you have a tummy ache. But I'm just thinking of maybe my lactose intolerance friends.
Yeah, me too.
No, I can't say no to ice cream. That's something I'm going to go future. So I'm going to be this weekend with a lot of people because I'm going to Phoenix to see my in-laws. And I think my yes is probably going to look like a no. We always say in cuddle parties, saying a no to someone else is a yes to yourself. Right? So I think I'm going to say yes to myself when I feel like I need to hang back and have some alone time. As an introvert, it can get a little much to be with people all the time.
Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah. So yeses and nos are pretty interchangeable.
They are.
In the right context.
If it's no to ourselves, it might be yes to them or vice versa. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. That was a good card.
That was.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. What do we want to share today?
And just thinking about talking with you, the phrase that continues to stick with me strongly is that I envision myself saying this at the end, but I'll probably say it a few times, is one of the bravest things that I did for myself was ask for help. Yeah. And I believe I would probably say everyone, I'll go on record, that just asking for help. And it could be simple ways like I'm moving or I need help with this recipe, or it could be major ways like this is really hard work and I need some help working through it. Like we've talked about committee, right? Yeah. There's people that are there to support you in various ways. And there's sometimes I don't know who in my committee I even need help with, or I don't even know what help I need. I just know I need it. And so just being vulnerable and doing it. But I don't know, I've really, really been pondering that a lot. And I've had some conversations with friends about that. Like that is, I believe, one of the bravest things you can do. And I know Brene Brown echoes that a lot in her writings, but it feels really strong for me, to be able to take those steps. And I was thinking about when I just reached out to you and didn't know you at all. And it was like, I know, and it felt super, super brave, but it felt super right and super important. And I kind of go along with like being true to myself. And oftentimes one of the phrases I've used in some other workshops I've given is like, what's the most loving thing I can do for me? And it reminds me of the yeses and nos we just talked about, because sometimes the most loving thing for me is also the most loving thing for those around me or those I'm with. And sometimes it is just the most loving thing for me, and others might not understand it or approve it, but that's okay too. Yeah. But again, it's really sitting with that. What's most loving right now?
I don't know about you. A lot of I don't know what the right word is. A lot of times in my childhood, I was forced to be alone, right? Like if I was upset, it was go to your room.
Right.
And I feel like I've told this story a lot lately. I look back and I think, of course I was angry. Like I would get sent to my room. My room was upstairs, and I remember just screaming, blood-curdling screams of just like temper tantrum to the moon, right?
Yeah.
And I would write on pieces of paper, "I hate you," and I would tape them to metal hangers and drop them down the stairwell so that they couldn't be ignored.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And that becomes your kind of norm. And as an adult, for me, it is edgy to ask for help.
Right.
I can handle everything by myself. That's what I tell myself. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
But like, for me, like, it's been kind of an agreement with Paul, is my first instinct is to push away when I'm upset. And years ago, we kind of made an agreement that even though that's what feels natural, I know I need to move closer, not farther. And so even if I'm not ready to talk, he's going to be with me.
Wonderful.
Right. And now it's turned into a lot of like, I don't even have to ask. He'll go, "Do you want to lay your head on my lap?" And I'm like, "Yes, please." And I'll lay down and he'll just pet me and I cry. And I remember the first time I kind of connected the dots and I went, "Oh crap, this is exactly what I do with clients." And I get to receive it too. But so much of what I do is a reflection of what I've gotten from him. I just ordered a new t-shirt today. I designed it myself, and the front says, "Therapeutic love heals."
Nice.
Because at first I just put love heals, and then I've been reading a lot about therapeutic love or analytic love.
Yeah.
And because I'm always trying to figure out what is it that I do, right? Yeah. And I just, if I could put it in its simplest form, is that I love my clients. Right? Is that because that's what's helped me the most, is just being loved for who I am.
Right.
In all my mistakes and in flaws, or we like to call them authenticity. Yeah. Right? That to be loved in that space.
Right. And I think being met right where you're at, like you've shared some of your stories with Paul, and that's one of the things that feels so alive to me when you share those stories, like how present, but you allowing him to be and open for it and asking for it, that awareness that you have and just that vulnerability, it takes to do that. And also, I know for me in my work with you, just the safeness that feels, and I'm grateful because I can't make that. I mean, there's been wonderful people that I just don't feel comfortable with. I can't explain it. I don't know why, but no. And
yeah, I wonder how much of it's because I've been there.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, I think that I was again having my lunch date yesterday with this somatic experiencing person. We were talking about, I don't think anybody gets into this kind of work without some kind of background that brought us here.
Absolutely.
Right. But I just feel very fortunate that in my work, I mean, I've fucked up in years past of how to bring my own experience into the space. I've gotten way better at when it's appropriate and when it's not, and stopping myself and asking, who is this for?
Yeah.
In me telling this story, who is it for? Because God, I got great advice years ago that when you feel like saying something, like it's like in an interaction, if it's like I feel this urge, I have to inject this statement, that a lot of times we probably just need to say it to ourselves.
Yes.
So I will pause and like run it through my head for a second and be like, okay, is this helpful?
Right.
Why do I feel like I need to say this thing? And so sometimes with clients, I'll say, okay, I want to tell you a story. I think it's going to be helpful for you. This is why I want to say it. I want to say the thing I'm about to say. But I feel very fortunate that that gets to be part of my work, is like, look, I'm just ahead of you. I've maybe haven't had the exact same experience you had, but I've been doing my own work, and I'm still doing my own work. And yeah, sometimes I'm still struggling.
Sure.
Like, I feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. Back to the point you made initially with this, I think one of the things that I thought about was, that's why the asking for help is so monumental for me, because I always believed, and I still struggle a bit with it, I should be able to handle it. Like, what do you expect? You know what I mean? That was one of the phrases I grew up with. Like, no, like, you should be able to handle this. And it's, I think because of the background of what I've experienced, I feel way off if I ask someone for help. Like, I blew it. You know what I mean? I blew it somehow. And that was a really hard thing to work with. I worked with my therapist extensively in that. And I think that's one of the things that opened the door, you know, because when I reached out for help to my therapist, that was a huge step. But I knew I was at a really tough place of self-loathing where I didn't know where else to go or what to do. And I knew this was bigger than me, much bigger than me. And I'd worked on it for a number of years in different formats and venues, but nothing. And so it was really, really hard, but really important. But like you were saying, like what we were raised with are those tapes or those phrases of people near and dear to us, and kind of how they, I know for me, vibrate sometimes. You know, we show up in different ways, I would say, you know, in my thinking, that end up being really, whoa, you know. And so to me, it's like I've learned in my work, okay, like either where's the evidence, you know, that this is true and something I can and should be able to handle. And then for the longest time, I started by just taking the word should out of my vocabulary. I just took should out, and it was like, no,
Let me pose another thing. This just came up on my Instagram the other day. I'll back up a little bit. I want to tell a little bit of a story. Speaking of going to Phoenix, last time I was in Phoenix was Thanksgiving, and Paul and I were in the car. We were driving around the state, doing a bunch of like reliving some childhood memories that I had, and it was really fun. But we're really good at having deep conversation when we're driving, and I was sharing with him about a journaling exercise that's supposed to actually been proven to improve your immune system. And I asked him, so what 3 traumatic events, like give me 3 traumatic events, because the instructions were like, don't necessarily start with your most traumatic event.
Yes.
Pick a smaller one to start this writing exercise. And he goes, I don't really have any. And I was like, instant judgment I had about him.
Wow.
Of like, are you some kind of psychopath or something? Like, how do you not have traumas?
Right.
And he said, I think the thing that comes to mind is how many people have I hurt? Which is traumatic in itself to think about, I guess, if you feel like you've been hurting people.
Right.
Anyways, I was talking to my colleague, Brian Gibney, on the way home from Phoenix, because we have a Monday call every week. And I said, oh my God, let me tell you this thing that Paul said. Like, can you believe that he doesn't have any trauma? And he said to me, Michelle, what if Paul doesn't hold on to trauma the way that you do? And I go, oh my God.
Wow.
Is this what it's like to not have an ACEs score? Are you familiar with ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Okay. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast yet.
Yeah.
But I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes, because Gabor Mate talks a lot about this, in that the higher your adverse childhood experiences score is, the more health issues you will have in your life. So I'm on Instagram, and I think I probably put this in my stories. I don't think I saved it, but I'm going to go find it, and maybe I can even play with inserting it into the video. Or no, we're not doing video. Maybe I can insert the audio into this interview.
Does everything go back to childhood? Can people experience a trauma at 16, 21, 29, 33 that will impact them so severely as an adult?
If you look at the studies on post-traumatic stress disorder, 100 soldiers go into battle, 20 come out with PTSD, 80 don't. Why not? The 20 that go home with PTSD, other people were traumatized in childhood. and the adult experience simply triggers the old trauma. Even in concentration camp survivors, those that had safe, supportive early childhoods had a much better chance of coming out of it without significant trauma symptoms. I think it all goes back to childhood. I think that's when our brain is formed, that's when our personality is formed, that's when our fundamental beliefs about the world are formed, that's when we develop either positive or negative attitudes towards ourselves, towards our possibilities. I think it's all happens in the template of childhood. And later on, how we deal with adversity that comes on later on is very much conditioned by how we were first raised in the first place.
And what does trauma mean, right? Let's just do a little refresher course here. Trauma isn't the thing that happened. It's how our body stores it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? And a lot of talk is about if you go through something traumatic and you don't have a support system, you're in it alone.
Right.
That is where it kind of settles in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't get moved.
Absolutely.
Animals shake it off. They literally shake it off. We use that term, right? We used to use that term. I feel like who had there was a song, Shake It Off, right. Taylor Swift, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think they're really disturbing videos. I watched a video one time of a polar bear gets tranquilized or dart, and when he comes, because they're tagging him or something, when he comes back through, he violently shakes.
Wow.
To release that trauma.
Wow.
And we don't do that. Right. And we're learning techniques to be able to do that, but sure. It's not instinctual for us.
Absolutely.
And so trauma isn't what happened. It's how our body or memories store it. It's not, what do they say? It doesn't come back as a memory. It comes back as a feeling or I don't know. There's so many little one-off phrases around how to describe trauma. But I'm also a firm believer that it doesn't have to be like these big T traumas. Mm-hmm. Right? I remember Gabor Mate, who I just love him. You'll hear me say his name 5 million times. He'll say like it could be just something that should have happened that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So we think about nurturing, and a lot of us are like, well, yeah, I mean, our parents kept a roof over our heads and we were fed and blah, blah, blah. But were you emotionally nurtured? Right? And those things, the lack of those things can give you some complex PTSD symptoms.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's interesting you should bring that up. Last night in my journal, I was looking at it real quick, and one of the things I wrote last night was how me as the adult was really feeling aware that I was feeling forlorn, mm-hmm. and realizing that the grade school and high school Judy, like the younger ages in me, was feeling abandoned. And I was like, wow. Mm-hmm. It was and it was interesting for me just writing that and putting it out there helped lessen it a bit, but mm-hmm. I was just so aware of what I was feeling. And, but to have that in the little girl in me feel the abandonment, but yet for the adult, it was forlorn, and how it felt like it was mimicking each other, right? Different words, a bit of a different experience, but very similar in terms of how it made me feel in my body.
Yeah, so many feelings are familiar.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that excavation of trying to. I don't know if it's necessary to do this. My brain really likes to connect the dots.
Me too.
And when I get that, this feels old, I need to figure out mm-hmm. what its origin story was.
Right, the lineage.
And as soon as I make that connection, it's like everything in my system just calms down. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. I can move forward. And then I've been really fortunate. One that comes to mind specifically, I think I've talked about it on here, has never come back. Mm-hmm. I used to get this like repetitive critic in my mind after sex would tell me that my partner was going to abandon me. Mm-hmm. And then I figured out, like, I felt young, and my husband said, because I said it out loud to him, because I share everything out loud. I'm very transparent. And I was like, you need to know this thing that always comes up in my head. I haven't shared it with you until now. And he's like, well, that doesn't make a lot of, it's not make sense. It's not accurate to our situation. Mm-hmm. Right. And he goes, do you think this has something to do with your ex-husband? And I said, no, I feel younger than that. Right. And I was able to take it back to like my first
I remember
boyfriend.
you sharing about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the fact that story doesn't come back for me now.
Mm-hmm.
So just getting to complete that.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about any stories that we've been able to rewrite?
Oh boy. Where do I start?
Well, I don't know where you want to, I don't know how much you want to share.
Yeah. I feel like there's so much there, even as you were talking, like the most recent one that I haven't had a chance to share with you yet. And I really do. I know you've talked previously, I think, on some of your podcasts about the triad model and how powerful and significant. And I feel for me, that's been winner, in so many ways.
For the people at home, real quick, pause. Mm-hmm. Let me just pop in. It's like pop-up video. I don't know if you ever watch a VH1 pop-up video. Triadic model, meaning I work with Judy's therapist. So all of us are a team. The three of us are a collaboration, and there's nothing that happens that we're not all on board with. Right? Not that I pause a session and call up your therapist and say, "Hey, I'm about to do this thing." But we have a general sense of each other and feel that there's an open door to talk to each other about things.
Right. And before you and I meet, we meet the therapist, the triad model. We all meet together before, that, and then sometimes after, or exchange emails. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, really important. But and I didn't get a chance to share this with you because I try to keep you in the loop. But this just happened Saturday night last weekend. I was at a friend's. Me and another friend, there's a couple of us that are like friends from high school youth group days, and we get together whenever we can. So like once a month, every few months. And so this one friend invited us over for dinner. And so we're sitting there in the living room just chatting. And she goes, "Why don't we go out on the balcony and have dinner?" And it was 3 floors up, right? And one of the beautiful transitions I've seen happen within me is, for the longest time, I have this huge list of what I thought, well, that's just who I am, or that's just because of, or this is just how it is, or it's me, how I was raised, whatever. And so many things I've been learning in my work with both you and my therapist is, no, that's the PTSD talking, right? And this was one of those situations. I had actually 2 of those situations happen that I was like, wow. And one of them very specifically for me was, she said, well, why don't I go sit on the patio? And I didn't think anything of it. We sit out in her patio and table and chairs are there and we take our food out. And again, we're 3 stories up and I sit down and I'm eating and, we ended up going back in because I think some mosquitoes or bees showed up and we came back in and I just sat there for a minute. And I actually went to the restroom because I was like, oh my gosh, like, the PTSD response would have felt, I have to figure out a plan. So if this would collapse, how would I be safe? How could I help everyone else be safe? And I'm not a doomsday. I'm like very much the glasses half full kind of personality. But in those moments, movie theater is another perfect example. And again, I bet it was about 6 months ago. And I do believe it's, for me, I see it 2 different ways. It's the EMDR work in therapy, working through some issues, and then also the safe place in working with you. And combining those together have been so significant. And like, I was at a movie theater and I'm like, why do I always have to sit in the very back row on one of the on the very back row, either on the right or the left? I always want to see exits and entrance. I want to see who's coming in. Are they packing? Got like all this kind of stuff. And I never realized how commonplace that was for me. And yeah, there's wisdom a little bit in that, but for me, I knew it was more of a PTSD response. Am I safe? Do I have a plan? And it was over the top, but it didn't give me anxiety. It was one of those analytically, okay, if this happens, I can go there and there. Okay, I'm good. Let's enjoy the movie. And I'm done. But my analytical needed to feel safe.
It's just like going into a restaurant.
Mm-hmm. That was my next.
I always ask who I'm with, where do they need to sit, right? Mm-hmm. I set my office up to make sure that if you lay on my bed a certain way, that you can make sure that you can see the door.
Yes.
Right? You can choose to put your back to it, but that's something that usually people do sometime in the work as part of their work to experience that feeling and if they can do that.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And for me though, it's just like, I feel like, yes, my lens has changed, but I think in a very like beautiful is the only word I can think of, how it's changing from the inside out. You know, like I've had that experience where I went out with a friend I've had for many, many years, and we went out to lunch, and she knows by now I have to sit right see the door. And the way we walked in, she sat on that side and she looked at me and said, "You okay with this?" So my back was to the door, and I thought, wow, I didn't even realize that. I'm really okay. And I do think one of the things that was really significant, Michelle, was it was actually in July when I did the first cuddle session with you. And I'm laying there and my back is facing your door in that room. And I went, oh my gosh, because no way, especially our first session, new place, new area, new person, no way like that. The self-protection, you know, because of all that happened to me when I was young, it was like, no, like my body, my mind automatically goes into that self-protect mode, care for myself, you know what I mean? And so very significant. And I was like, I remember telling you that and the tears were running down my cheeks because I was like, my back is to the door. And I didn't even like think about it, realize it, or panic about it when I noticed it. I was able to like take a deep breath and realize I feel so safe here. Yeah. And my analytical was like, okay, that makes no sense. But yet my body was saying, oh, how deeply I feel this, you know?
Yeah. For the people at home, you had worked with a cuddler before that. Mm-hmm. So this is not your first cuddle therapy session.
Correct.
Yeah. And you have a really somatically based talk therapist.
Yes.
Like you have had years of work. Mm-hmm. Getting to that point.
Absolutely.
You didn't walk in for session one and be like, wow, I feel so safe with you. Like, I'm not magic.
Right.
Like, I'm here to help you learn how to trust yourself and put as little up against that. Like, I like to think I have a really lovely nervous system. I'm really mindful of, like I said, how I have my space set up and, you know, there's something I think because of my own history, I'm very careful.
Absolutely.
I'm very protective.
Right.
Yeah.
That trauma informed portion is powerful. And it was, and I could probably clarify that it wasn't like it was magical when I walked in and all felt okay. Like going out on the porch or sitting in the movie or meeting my friend for lunch or meeting with you for our first session. How my body is beginning naturally to not send out that warning sign or that type of feeling. And I'm only beginning to notice it also. I think two things are happening. One is I'm noticing it, but also the awareness in spaces, how that can really, really happen and how healing it is and how beautiful it is. And I can't explain it. Like,
yeah, it's self-soothing.
Yeah.
It's also a combination of still co-regulating.
Right.
Like, I just looked up, I wanted to find this interview I'd heard a few years back about, the title of it was called The Myth of Self-Regulation. Mm-hmm. And it was, you know, we went through a period of time where hyper independence was the goal kind of thing. Like you should be able to regulate yourself, right? You should be able to self-regulate. And what this therapist was talking about was that, what if you're never actually self-regulating? You're always regulating with the memory mm-hmm. of someone else, mm-hmm. right? So the idea that, you know, you can still connect with me even when we're not in the same space. Mm-hmm. And I know you've done that, you know, quite a few times. I love that idea that we're never alone. Mm-hmm. Even when we're alone.
Yep.
Right? Who do you have that is your go-to? And I remember having this question, like, who cared for you? Who nurtured you as a child? I don't have a memory of mm-hmm. somebody really like holding, like scared, upset little Michelle.
Right.
Like I just said, I was sent to my room and told, you know, I'll give you something to cry about and what have you. even my mother, I don't remember being the nurturing. And some of that might be my sister. My middle sister was born like a year and 7 months after me. So I know I've talked to my therapist with this about like that being an abandonment for me because I wasn't done being, having that kind of care as an only child. Like as soon as I could talk, I was like, send her back.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so whether I got that nurturing or not, I don't remember it.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
I remember it with my grandma. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. I think we've talked about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And my grandma died when I was 8 years old. And I don't remember it past time at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how significant. And it wasn't all the time, but I knew there were moments, I could lay her head in my lap and she would just stroke my hair. And that's it. Like, I don't have any memories of that with my mom or my dad.
Those are life-saving people. In my work with especially survivors of childhood sexual assault, when they can report a significant adult in their life, it makes all the difference in how they've managed through that kind of trauma.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you had your grandma.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one thing when we did our first session together, I think I mentioned that to you. Like, oh my gosh. Like, and I don't remember ever having that type of a feeling. Like, her nurturing presence felt present in that room. And, I've never experienced that before, ever. And it was just a really beautiful moment. And
yeah, that's what I love about, I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I would say I wasn't a very nurturing mom, but I remember my kids are 8 years apart. My oldest, every night we would sit in the recliner together and, watch TV or whatever. And then I got pregnant with my second one. And I remember when I had him, that all stopped. And then I think that my second one never got quite as much of that for me. At least I don't feel like he did.
Right.
And so it's a little interesting to now be a professional nurturer.
I bet.
There's a part of me that kind of feels like, I mean, maybe my kids feel like they got the short end of that. At the same time, I think the only reason I can do it now is because I don't have kids at home. Like, having kids was hard for me. Like, I think I'm undiagnosed autism and ADHD, and I've been watching some TikToks about moms with autism, autistic moms, I should say. And there's a commonality in a lot of them of like the sensory overload of having children. And I'm trying to like process that for myself of like, oh, I mean, maybe that's why it was hard for me to be a really, I don't know if engaged is the right word. I guess I have a lot of regret that I wasn't more, I wasn't more present with my children when they were younger. I've made up for it now. I mean, I don't look and say, oh, it's affected our entire relationship, but I do have that feeling of like, wow, I wonder what it's like for my kids to have a professional mom. And maybe they have feelings that I wasn't that soft and comfy for them.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Can't do it over.
That's right.
So
absolutely.
I'm glad I can be soft and comfy now.
And you are.
Yeah.
I think too, the other thought that came up a little bit ago was in my story, not believing I was worth being helped. When I was saying, well, I need to figure it out. And I know that's where that came from. My self-worth and the self-loathing was so significant for me that I didn't believe I was worth it. And that was years of believing that way and seeing myself that way in circumstances that echoed that,
How could you not?
Exactly.
Like, I think if I know something, and maybe somebody will tell me I'm wrong, but I think when you come out of childhood abuse, childhood sexual abuse, I can't speak for any other, because I haven't worked with it so much. I don't know how you come out of that with a intact self-esteem and
right.
Self-worth. Like, I just, those two, it's
exactly, because that's what you know.
It's hard to come out of childhood with that in general, in the best of circumstances, right? Because there's so many things that can affect that. But in that, with that history, that's just where I have so much compassion for my clients that make it to me, right? Because I just think it's so brave.
Yeah. And I know in my work with you, I feel like the groundwork with my therapist was I'm worth being helped. You know, the first year of working together, we just did challenging belief worksheets for the first year. And now I look back and I'm like, gosh, that made so much sense, because how could I do the EMDR work with not doing that, right? How could I, if I didn't challenge some of those beliefs, like where's the evidence, where did they come from? And I address those things. And like one example would be, if I start crying, I'll never stop.
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced if I started crying, I would never stop, and nobody could tell me different.
I think that's really common.
Yeah, but I didn't know that, right? It was like, I was embarrassed to admit it. And I sat with my therapist early on and I said, yeah, but you don't understand. If I start crying, I'll never stop. And she's like, yeah, other people have mentioned that. And I'm like, no, that's me. Like, that's who I am, right? And then what I began to realize was she gave me this whole biological explanation as to scientifically why that is not physically possible. And now I look back and that soothed my analytical part of my brain, right? Because I'm very analytical also. And I wanted to understand it. So that gave me evidence that no, it's not possible, and understand that I really, really feel that way. And I see how that gave me the groundwork. And it was a real beautiful tool that came into place to move forward with, right?
Yeah.
And then it helped me. I know we talk about the word like titrate or microdose, because the other thing I believed very strongly was I wasn't worth being held or being hugged. And I had no evidence that spoke to me or made me feel that warm and fuzzy inside that, oh yeah, I do. Yeah, I remember. It was like, no, I don't remember growing up that way. You know, I know I've shared one of my very difficult memories was being sexually abused by my dad. And like, you hurt me. Now hold me. You need to hold me. And I'm telling you, the work you and I have done on it has, I believe, like calmed my system in some ways and gave me evidence that no, I am, yet I'm still warming up to that. You know, it's still a process happening, because, okay, I am worth being hugged and I am worth being held. I'm not going to disqualify myself, nor do I want to, but what's that look like? You know, and just feeling safe that way and taking those steps. Does that make sense?
It reminds me, I know you and I are reading Setting Boundaries That Stick. Mm-hmm. And there is, I'm sure I outlined it. Let me find it. Stephen Porges, I think, was the person that no, Dan Siegel. I thought I just found it. I'm going to take a second and try to find it, because I do want to bring it into the space. Because I thought, when I read that, I think this is something clients need to understand. Like, they want to know, how long is this going to take?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Right? Or just because I know that and I believe it, now what's it look like to integrate that or envision that in myself or see that for me? It grows. I believe it. You know, there's a necessity for the growth and the getting used to it.
Yeah. I'm not finding it. I must not have highlighted that when I went through and read it in my book, which is so weird to me. Oh, no, here it is. Haha. If you say you can't, it'll be there. Okay. It only takes 3 to 4 weeks to develop a practice, but it takes 2 years or more of these practices to transform your brain in a permanent way so that it feels natural and second nature to function with all of your boundaries intact.
Well said.
And I look back this is the 10-year anniversary of my liberation from my first marriage. That's what I'm calling it. And there's been many stages of Michelle. So I joke that I'm in Michelle 5.6 or something like that right now. And I think it's only been in the last couple of years that a lot of these things have started to feel more natural. Like, I found my self-worth on MDMA in 2019. Mm-hmm. So that's 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it feels like I've always had self-worth. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like I've said to Paul, wow, when I have clients that really struggle with the self-criticism and things, it hurts as someone who loves and cares for them. And I said to Paul, how did you put up with me? What was it like to love me like that? Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't feel that way now.
Yeah, you're right. It's taken me a couple of years to be able to identify that critic's voice, because it sounded the same, because it was.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Now when the critic shows up, I'm much more like, oh, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Because it's not so repetitive. Like when it's the norm to be critical of yourself and others, that's the norm.
Exactly right.
And my mind is a safe space for me now. And so when that shows up, I can go, oh, I see you. What's that about?
Right.
And the book, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, says that that's an emotional flashback. Mm-hmm. And so then I can go back and go, where does that come from? Whose voice is that? Whose message is that? I don't hear voices so much. So for me, it's like, where did that message come from?
Right. Yeah. And I think you said it so powerfully in that phrase, what is that about? Because in my growing up and in my like high school, college years, marriage years, being in a Catholic cult for a while, I mean, a true cult. I'm not saying Catholic is cult, but the cult I was in, it was formed all around that. And my goodness, like, excuse me, thinking that phrase, like, what is that all about? So when things come up like that now, I used to dismiss those hard feelings, or maybe anger from those days, or sadness from those days, or even some doubt or confusion or whatever. And I'm learning, okay, if that icky feeling starts rising in me, pausing and saying, what's that about? Right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to, oh, that's not good, I'm getting rid of it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Be curious.
Right.
Yeah. And I think curiosity is not the same thing as judgmental.
No.
And even like, it's one of those great like tips for dealing with other people. Is like, rather than asking like critical questions of your partner, what if you frame them as curiosities?
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And we can do that for ourselves too.
Yeah. Because I think, I don't know about you, but over the years, I learned to just dismiss or push down those hard feelings. Tears weighed on. When I was young, I have a vivid memory of 4 years old. And I remember laying in the dining room, sitting in the corner, just crying. And I don't remember what I was crying about. I'm sure something I wanted, but I was just crying. And I remember my mom said these words to me. She said, if I cried like that when I was your age, I would have been hurt. I would have been beat. And somewhere inside of me, I was not afraid she was going to hit me or get upset with me about it. And it was so interesting to work through this and see this. But I swear I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I remember so clearly thinking, I don't want to ever say that again, because it made my mom sad. I don't want to make her sad. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up not crying because it would make her sad. Sure. And that just became a way of life for me, not crying, you know?
Yeah. If I could have everyone understand one thing, it would be, as kids, everything is our fault. Like, that's how we internalize everything. Mm-hmm. Like, we have that much control. Yes. Somebody said, like, kids are totally egotistical, right? In the fact that they think that everything is happening because of them. They don't have the capacity to understand that it's not.
Right.
And we're at a young age, and that is when we decide how the world functions.
Absolutely.
Right? And so
that's our framework.
That's our framework. And that's what we're doing in my space and in talk therapy and all these different modalities, right? Is hopefully we're we're coming to a place where we can see a mismatch in what we think the world, how we think the world works based on us as a little kid, versus now where we can question that and go, oh, wait.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not real. And that's not your mom's fault.
Right.
Like,
that was her lived experience.
We can never walk through parenting and not fuck stuff up. Right? Especially if you don't have the psychoeducation to understand how am I supposed to have kids that are well regulated when I'm not well regulated?
Right. Absolutely.
Nobody ever taught me that.
Right.
Or I wouldn't have been having kids when I was 20 years old.
Absolutely.
Not that my first plan wasn't planned anyways, but
right.
My thing being like, we're not learning what it takes to be a good parent in the way that I think we should be.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think about what I was saying about the emotions, and when things come up, that feel crunchy, to the past, whether it was parenting or choices I made or whatever it was, whenever those feelings come up and there's something that like, gosh, I feel really angry about this, in my mind, for a number of different reasons, I would want to, like, what's the opposite of anger? You know what I mean? Or what's the opposite of sadness? Happy. And I'm just going to make myself be happy or do things that make me happy. And what I began to realize was I wasn't addressing. And so any emotion that felt negative to me, and I had a broad scope of what negative felt like, then all of a sudden, and one of the greatest gifts I've learned from my therapist is sit with that. Like, it's telling me something. It's there for a reason. Like, it's coming up for a reason. And so if I'm feeling scared, I know in some of the work you and I have done, I was like, gosh, that feels really scary. Will you hold me? Those type of things that come up, and realizing, okay, wait a minute. Instead of dismissing that or self-judging that, why don't I just sit with that? And like you said, lean into curiosity. What's curiosity really look like with that?
What if certain feelings weren't bad?
Exactly.
Right? Well, like in my household growing up, anger was really welcomed. I guess joy was. I don't know any household where joy is not welcomed. I suppose there's some begrudging-y person that doesn't want to have joy in their life. But, sadness and fear were definitely not welcomed in my house growing up. So, like, if you have a judgment about those things and you're trying to avoid those feelings,
right,
they're all neutral and they're just information.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, and that's why I think leaning into them with curiosity. I'd given a talk at a creative arts retreat last month, and that was one of the things that I said that I don't know about you, but when you say something out there publicly, and then it's like you're reminding yourself, and it was one of those experiences, because I started thinking about how important leaning into things with curiosity has been, and how with hope and gratitude, doing both of those with curiosity has opened up a span and a dimension of life that I never saw, that I never even knew was there. It was there, but I never saw it as clearly as I see it now.
Oh, I love you.
I love you too.
I just love you. It's been such a pleasure to get to work with you and be just you've had a very long journey in a very complicated life. And I am delighted to have a little snippet of being part of it with you.
Yeah, it's a little bigger than a snippet, I'd say.
Well,
it feels that way
in the span of things in time,
absolutely.
It feels small, but I know it's had huge ripples.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know in working with my therapist initially, I remember saying to her, you know what, it's okay if I'm too hard of a case, or this is too much. I get it. It's okay. And she was like, bring it. Okay. Yeah. Kind of thing, and challenge me. And so I feel like when I started working with you, I was a little more vetted, I guess I would say. Like, okay, I am worth being heard. Okay. But am I worth being held? Am I worth being, that's the only way I can think to put it. Like just being held, really being seen. you know, and some of the work we've done together, I feel tremendously seen and powerfully seen. And I'm realizing to be more patient with myself in the process of it. Okay, we worked on this. Okay, we're done. My analytical's like, okay, we're done. And my body's saying, oh, we just started. No, we've just begun. You know what I mean?
Peeling that onion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, I think sometimes people really struggle to know what my work looks like. And I struggle to describe it because it's different, right? I remember when I met your therapist the first time and she goes, so how do you work?
Yeah.
And I got very imposter syndrome-y. I don't, like, am I going to disappoint this therapist if I just say the truth, which is I don't have a plan. I have a big toolbox.
Right.
And I come in and I want to know what's happening in the moment. Because that's what's like alive in the space. And I remember your therapist goes, oh, cool. That's how I work too. And I was like, whoa.
I know. Wow. And I think that made me go, because same language, you know, the freestyling in a sense, or the playground, or, you know, the dance, and how it's like a give and take in some ways. And it's a process and it's creative, and absolutely.
Yeah. And so much of what I want my clients to learn to build up is this sense of instinct. Like, the truth is that everyone knows what they need. They know it. They don't trust it.
Right.
And for some reason, some people have very good reason not to trust it.
Right.
If you're in active addiction,
right,
not the time to start trusting your instinct is not right in that space. Absolutely. Right. But with the level of work that you've done, right, we are really collaborating together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am just another person for you to go through some experiences with in a new way. Right. I'm not a blank slate. The word I'm loving to describe myself as lately is sturdy.
I remember we talked about that last time.
I'm sturdy so that you can take risks.
Absolutely.
Right? So when you come in, it's like, okay, what are we going to do today? Let's make a plan of action. Not let's talk about it a week ahead of time.
Right.
Because we don't know what's going to be alive that day.
Right.
What are we going to do today? We're going to, let's get naked and look at ourselves and see how we feel in our bodies. Right. That was super powerful.
Yes.
And something I wish I did with more clients, right? Because I don't know that people understand how powerful that space is just being in our rawness with another person.
Absolutely.
So much stuff can come up in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like, I get an idea. Hey, what would it look like if we walked in and out of the bathroom together?
Yeah.
Somebody that doesn't have a background in this might go, why would you do that?
Sure.
Right. And I'm like, why wouldn't you? If you've had a lot of things happen in that space,
right?
Can we rewrite some of that story?
Yeah. Yeah.
With a new co-host?
Right. Yeah, the reframing has been super powerful. And as you had said, it happens more instinctively. You know, it's not I show up and say, okay, I need you to do this, this, and this with me. Let's be this. That's out the window. I show up authentically and honestly saying, okay, this is what I know right now. And I'll bring out my journal or some notes from a therapy session and say, okay, this is what's in front of me. You know, I know we're meeting a month from now and I already have my wheels turning because I feel like my body, like inside, it's already like, yeah, oh yeah, ooh. You know, and again, like you said, it's the onion peeling, but it's also, it's my desire to live fully alive. And I am seeing more and more clearly, whether it's roadblocks to me, whether it's a kink in it, whether it's a critic voice, whether it's what my dad did to me that made me believe this, and just the opportunity being given to work with you and with my therapist to rewrite some of that. I've said it and I'll say it 1,000 times more. It's a quality of life I never even knew was possible. I mean, not just out there, but I never knew it was possible. the self-loathing and the no regard and the worthlessness that I felt, and to show up having done work, but still feeling that way physically so much, like in my body, in my identity, and some of the harm that was done to me because of my dad's vicious sexual abuse, that for me to hug myself was a really big deal. And it took months in therapy to get to that. I noticed when I put my hand on my chest a year into therapy, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Is that your self-compassion gesture?
I believe it is, because
mine is I rub my arm.
I remember because when I start feeling my heart talk, it's like this just happens. No, absolutely. Yeah.
Relational, I don't have to tell this to you, I'm telling this to other people. Relational wounds heal in relationship.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think talk therapy is super powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's another piece that I'm dying to get a better understanding in the therapy world. I understand it. I'm dying for the therapy world to get a better understanding that adding this physical component, this surrogate relationship, like I'm really working primarily in the platonic these days. It's still surrogate partner therapy in the sense that I am still in cuddling or in surrogate partner therapy. It is building a relationship between me and you so that relational healing can start to happen.
Absolutely. Like,
it doesn't have to be with your mom. It doesn't have to be with your dad. It doesn't have to be with your husband. It doesn't have to, you need someone. And somebody once referred to like this kind of work as like, you wouldn't perform surgery on yourself. You need to have another person in the room to do surgery.
Yes.
Right? And there's something about that co-regulation factor, the fact that our nervous systems are talking to each other.
Right.
The relational component is there.
Absolutely.
And I'm not coming in with an activated nervous system that's going to fight with yours. Right? If you're in a relationship and you're trying to work through a lot of traumatic stuff, your partner's also got their history, and you might not have my partner who claims that they don't have any trauma. And I say claims, I really believe him. I do think that he really grew up in a really stable house.
Right.
That he doesn't have an ACEs score. Right. In the organic relationship world, it's a little more complicated because everybody's got their different feelings that come into play. And I get to just show up with like unconditional positive regard. I got my cheerleader pom-poms, right? And I'm just like, how can we get you to the next step?
And your arms are open.
And my arms are open.
Yeah.
And God, I wish therapists could at least give hugs.
Right.
You know, I've asked my therapist at times for hugs, and thankfully I've been able to get them under certain circumstances. But I was at a conference, and David Grant, who created Brain Spotting, which is an offshoot of EMDR, just for anybody who's a geek about this stuff like me. Somebody asked him a question about like, what do you do when your client is really activated? And he goes, are you asking me if I hug them? Because in the United States, in most states, if you hug your clients, you could lose your job. And in other countries, if you don't hug your client, you're a shitty therapist. And I remember being, I got to do a talk therapy session one time and then do a cuddle session right afterwards as a client. And it was so good.
Wow.
But I remember being in the therapy session going, I wish my therapist could even just sit next to me and know that our legs were touching. Anything to have physical contact would feel so good. But instead they're across like sitting in another chair across from me with, feet between us.
Right.
Like my nervous system, it's not what my nervous system needs.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do. I think I was thinking about one of the phrases that came to mind was how what I used to do is disqualify myself, right?
Mm.
Even beforehand. I mean, I remember getting on like a Zoom meeting and I already disqualified myself based on like who showed up. And it was either shadow work or imposter work. There's a lot of different words for it. But for me, it just made me realize the scope and the nature of how far and wide that self-judgment was. And learning to be a little softer with myself, or learning to identify when that disqualification, and I've noticed so much improvement in that, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's because what went along with disqualifying was because I'm broken and damaged.
Mm-hmm. You're not good enough.
Yeah. And one of the first things my therapist said to me, okay, right out of the gate, I just want to make clear that I'm not going to fix you because I don't see you as broken. And okay, that took me about 3 sessions to sit with. It's like, okay, my whole life, I've seen myself, honestly, as young as I can remember, damaged goods. Why I didn't belong. Because I would go to my friend's house and see their relationship with their family, and not even comparing it, but I would just see, because of the sexual abuse from my dad, it was never okay to climb up on my dad's lap. It never felt okay to me. And to see them relate differently in my mind, yep, it's just me. Yep, I'm no good. Yep. And it just layered upon layered. And then being involved in the cult, it was just earning and deserving. So it was like, okay, there it was, and challenges in my marriage. Okay, there it was. And it was amazing to see how I was just disqualifying myself, that it wasn't even a thought process. I just showed up that way, and I remember a few years, gosh, probably about 20 years ago, meeting with friends of mine. And I remember saying to this couple, they were an older couple, and I really had so much respect and love for them. And they were like neighbors. And I remember saying to them, well, if you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. And it's okay. And I remember saying that and meaning it. And I was like, it's really okay. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting with my therapist across from her saying it's okay. And I could tell, I felt like I was more ready to call you, to step into it, because, okay, I knew that was changing, but then now what? Because now it was like, okay, then what am I, and what do I need? What do I like? Like pleasure, in any way. Like, what do I really like? Well, I like frozen yogurt with peanut butter and chocolate chips, I mean, what do I really like? And that's really, really hard for me, to identify. And it's getting easier, but it's hard because I don't even know what my options are. Yeah. So I think it's that learning curve, and that's some of the amazing work that I've done with you, to even like, well, options could be this, or this,
Yeah, like it's so common to not know. Mm-hmm. And when you have a background of abuse, it's important to not know, mm-hmm. right? You don't get to have that anyways, right? It's everybody else's. You are just a tool.
Absolutely.
For other people.
Yeah.
And then you add that child not being able to understand what's happening, and that it's not their fault.
Right.
Right. Everything's your fault. Like it just
it
layers up layers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, whether you have that kind of abuse background or not, people come in here and they don't know what they like. They don't know what they want. Mm-hmm. Nobody's asked them, or they haven't had to decide what that is. And so that's why I think that, again, working in the moment is so important, because it would be okay if you came in here and I said, how do you want to connect today? And you're like, I want to eat frozen yogurt with peanut butter and chocolate chips. Let's do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I'm a yes to that.
Sure.
Let's do it. And you might, in another day, you might come in and be like, we're going to do the hardest fucking work we've ever done together. Today, I don't even know what that is, but I could throw in one of our old things. Like, I don't know if it was hard. Me laying on top of you. Was that hard?
Unimaginable, I would say. I wouldn't even say hard. It was like, I can't comprehend this.
Yeah. But like, talk about depth of work.
Oh, that was
that day.
Deep.
Using my body to compress your body and have it be a like radically intense experience of repair.
Yeah, radical.
I think we were joking about, I thought day one of our work together was going to be the big highlight day, right? And day two was just going to be some processing. And then to end up doing, I think, the most powerful work being laying on top of you.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those kinds of sessions are valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I never dreamed, like, the thought of that was like, I can't wrap my head around it. And I remember when I was going to do some cuddle work here where I live locally, I remember reaching out to the cuddle therapist and saying, I can't even imagine what like a cuddle event is. I can't even imagine like what that would look like. People just sit around and like hold hands like that. I had no frame of reference for it. You know what I mean? So I know in the depth of work you and I have done and how it's grown, the level of trust for you that you are not to harm me, not to hurt me. Like that is not your intention. And I know it and I believe it, but my body needs to know it. It can't be convinced, right? Like we talked about in the beginning, our body remembers this, and this. And so when it has something that feels so dramatically different and feels safe, it's like the mind gets, okay, wait a minute, you know?
Yeah, here's the thing I have to caveat, asterisk. I have harmed clients unintentionally. Mm-hmm. But then here's the awesome, cool thing is that we got to experience the process of repair.
Absolutely.
And for so many of my clients, they've never had that.
Yes.
They've never had someone take responsibility.
Yeah.
They've never had someone apologize and try to make it right.
Yeah.
Right. So years ago, I got that advice of like, I'm so afraid to screw something up. Right. And my mentor, Brian Gibney, says, and guess what? You're human. Mm-hmm. And if you screw something up, it's an opportunity to repair.
Absolutely.
And then I remember reading, like, there's no such thing. You cannot have a secure functioning relationship without conflict. Mm-hmm. And so now when I see a chance for conflict in my work, I get really excited about it because I think, ooh, here's an opportunity for us to strengthen our relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even when you suggested that to me, I was like, you were like, you know, yes or no, like, how's that feel for you? And I'm like, well, my body's saying, oh, hell yes. And my mind's saying, I can't even, you know? But again, I've been so grateful that day I leaned into curiosity because to imagine someone else's like body, skin, touching mine, feeling warm and soothing as opposed to startling and wanting to push and fight.
But how else do we rewrite that, right?
Yeah.
You can't talk that through.
Right.
You cannot just intellectualize the feeling of having that pressure in a different context.
Right. Right.
We have to have a space where we can have that experience. And in that experience, you knew that at any time you could say, nope, can't do this.
Or done.
Can't do it, done. And I would honor that instantly.
Right.
With zero judgment. And it's not even that we ever have to do that.
Right.
But it's the opportunity to do it and see what happens.
Right. And there's something really healing in my experience of like, I get to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
wow, I get to say that, you know?
Oh my gosh.
And working in that in therapy with my therapist, as you know, and know her, like, okay, that's too much. She's like, okay, well, let's try it this way. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and again, it shows up different for everybody. You know, I tend to be, you know, over the work with my therapist, I've really, over the years, her asking me, okay, where do you feel it in your body? Or does it have any image or any sight or any sound or any smell or any color related to it? Over and over and over again. And I am very imagery oriented to begin with. When I teach college, I teach images, like, so they can experience it. And so seeing that grow and then see that transfer into the relationship you and I have, you know, both in cuddle and surrogate work, makes it so much more like it's putting the hands on it, right? It's putting the arms on it. It's putting the hugs on it. That take it deeper inside. And sometimes it's heavy and sometimes it's not. It's just beautiful. It's a celebration. I remember like after our time together, I just was like sending you a note or an email or a FaceTime and saying, wow, as I process and weeks and days go by, you kind of sit with and realize what feels different. Like I was so excited to tell you about going out on that porch and realizing because I'm learning, I'm beginning to feel safer in my own body. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you can't put a value on that or a dharma or a depth of gratitude. And I started writing my second like somatic side book, right? Because I have some analytical stuff, but it's called Beyond Words, when there are no words. Because these are those moments when like there's no words to describe what that feels like, yet I know it feels so different and so amazingly good. Yet I don't know how to even say that. Like beyond, okay, thank you, Michelle. Yes, I'm sitting here crying in gratitude. Yes, thank you for. That's the only way I can think to convey it because even those words don't feel strong enough.
Yeah. Do you feel loved? That's what I want. I want you to feel loved.
Oh my, beyond what I knew was imaginable. Actually, how many times I've disqualified myself from being worth being loved. And I feel like in our time and in our work together and in the depth of work and in the times we've laughed when we've been so much alike, that presence of, no, I love you. Like I appreciate you deeply. And there's a sense of love and compassion. And it just feels like such a healthy relationship, the vulnerability and the honesty, yet the ability to hold space however I show up. It's not like I show up and have it all together and here's our list and da 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 da. Like I said before, it's like
I don't want you to have it together, right?
Showing up and I love the image. Like, no, this is a playground. No, this is just like an experiment.
Lab time.
Love those images.
Yeah, the times I feel most loved is when I'm most imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's something that I always thought I had to have it all together.
Yeah.
But the times that I actually feel like, oh, I am lovable because they're loving me even when I'm like this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, and I don't know if you'll need to explain this at all, but I'll say it first and then you can see, but the other real game changer for me has been time and time again when it's that little girl in me that feels so afraid or so scared or so overwhelmed. And you are literally just able to say, it's okay, little Judy, I'm here for you. I got you. And to have someone beyond me, outside of me, cherish that little girl within me. No words. There's no words.
Yeah. Thank you. I sit at night sometimes. I'm so inspired by you. And I get panicked that like I don't know how to yell this loud enough. That there's more things that people can do to work through their stuff.
Yes.
And thankfully a lot of people take this kind of work seriously. But I can't get it on a big enough platform, it feels like.
Yeah, and I felt arm in arm with you there. I remember after our last session, and I go to this support group on Monday nights, and I've gone for about 4 years, and it's for men and women who have been sexually abused, and I felt facilitated and be a part of it. And I couldn't wait to talk to the facilitator about the work you and I have done. And I mean, in raw, real terms, talk to her about it. And my heart is, I want everyone to know, no, there's more. Like, you don't have to die this way, feeling so broken and unloved or not able to be held. Like, it doesn't have to be there this way. Like, there's therapists out there that can, like, help you work through these things. And there's amazing cuddle therapists and surrogate partner therapists out there that can work in that triad model that to me is, the way I talk about it is from self-loathing to self-loving. Mm-hmm. Because you both believe in me. And it's helped me to take a step back and believe in me. Yep. And to know that, we talk about committee, that I can text or I can reach out and just say, oh boy, I'm stuck here, or this scares the crap out of me, the shit out of me. And But again, it's a place I feel welcome to show up and be vulnerable and be real. Where there's just, it's okay. There's space for it here. It's welcomed here. It's not just tolerated, it's welcome.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for coming on here and sharing. And you've done this with me a couple of times now. We were able to present at a thing a while back for some sex educators in training. And I don't know what the future holds for us professionally in our therapeutic relationship. I don't know what the future holds for us professionally in our whatever happens for you professionally moving forward, as far as like where you take your own work in helping other people. But I know we're forever linked.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've left you and my therapist into a part of my heart that nobody's ever been in, for many reasons, and some really good ones. And it's just a beautiful thing.
It's a lovely little collaboration we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish people from the housetops could see the triad model and how amazing it works. Take that.
They're going to see it. I'm bound and determined.
Yeah. Me too.
I've talked to your therapist. She's a yes to presenting with me if we can get some places to take on our story. And I hope to have another client with her in the future, and maybe many clients with her in the future. I just really thank you for bringing her into my life. She's magic.
I remember her saying to me not too long ago, "How did you even meet Michelle?"
Yeah. We all come together in however the universe makes it happen. And I'm just freaking, I've pinched myself for years about the people that I've have in my circle, and they're just amazing. People keep showing up, and you're one of them, and your therapist is one of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, is there anything, and we wrap, what kind of resources would you want people to know if they hear this and they're like, wow, I'm really struggling. Where do I start? I know you started with, what was the group that you started with? It was like a rape crisis group or something.
I started with, it's called PAR, and it's called Pittsburgh Action Against Rape. And I had a dear friend who was a counselor, and she said, I really believe they could help you. And I called them, and I refer to it in another, when I share about this on another talk I gave, it's like the longest walk, the shortest distance, because I showed up and just said I need help. And I shared my story of being sexually abused by my dad for a young age consistently, and how broken I was, right? How I was damaged goods and wasn't, the self-loathing was, like I said, off the charts. And so that's how I showed up there. And literally that's how I met my therapist. And the rest is history.
Lightning strikes.
Yeah, for real. And we were such an amazing fit. And I'm telling you, that was one of the things I was most nervous about, because I had a counselor I had gone to a couple years prior, and I hadn't gone to many counselors at all. Obviously, I didn't think I was worth it, right? And I went to one before when I came out of the cult, and it was a horrific experience. Mm-hmm. Like, she gave me a book of 30 Days of Freedom from Shame. And said, and she said, if you forgive your dad, then it would all be different. And I only had one memory back then. One memory, right? One memory. And it was like, okay. And so it took a long time for me to, how many times I shared that story with my therapist, because it was really hard, to trust and believe. And I didn't want a book. I didn't want just someone just hear me. Tell me if there's anything in me worth it. It was more how I showed up, just so broken. And then the work her and I have done to lead me to working with another cuddle therapist that led me to working with you, and forever grateful. It's the quality of life. I never, there's things in me alive that I never knew were even there. I had felt so dead in so many ways. And in what you mirror and what you welcome, has it brought those broken pieces back to life in a way that unimaginable for me. So absolutely thank you. I think you're my therapist when she listens to this, if she chooses to. But a deep gratitude for you and the work and the team, the triad team. I'm like on the rooftops about that. So.
Yeah, I have such gratitude for her. Mm-hmm. Like, woo, when we presented together and she described her work with you over the course of the years, and I wish we had a recording of it because it was like she didn't know about the future. She didn't know that you would end up working with me or with your cuddle therapist that you had back home. And it was like she was setting you up for all of this work without knowing that we existed.
Yes.
Because you needed it, the somatic part of her background, you needed that in general. But it was it was fit perfectly for this work. You showed up with so ahead of the curve.
And ready. I think that's what I felt about when I showed up at PAR. That's one of the first things I remember she said, and she goes, "You're really ready to be here." And I'm like, I went through the laundry list of what I've tried, what I've done in so many different capacities and nothing. And I still am this way. And, but again, I only had one memory when I first started meeting with her. So for me, it was a lot of repressed memories over time that were locked and stuck in there. And little by little, it was over a year, 2 years before they started coming out. But now I understand. My body finally felt safe enough to be able to give voice to them.
I was told at one time, your brain will only give you what you're ready to have.
Exactly. Yeah. My therapist has told me that. It's very powerful.
Yeah. It's powerful. It's very empowering.
Yes, it is.
Or maybe empowering is not the right word. It's very protective feeling that I will never be given more than I can handle.
Yeah.
That my mind will only give me the things that I'm ready.
Yeah, and how beautiful that we're made that way, right? We're wired that way. Absolutely. It's like a built-in safety zone, right? That shuts it off.
Yep. Yeah. Well, think about it. Little Judy did an amazing job taking care of you. Right?
You are so right.
Amazing job taking care of you.
Yeah.
And now we get to start to take that off of little Judy. Yes. And big Judy gets to step in and be the protector now.
Right? 2 weeks ago, those were the exact words my therapist said to me. The exact words she said. "Oh, little Judy, you've done so well."
She's amazing. Yeah. Like amazing. What a powerhouse. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're at an hour and 40 minutes.
Okay.
We could go. I know you and I could just
part 2, part
talk
3,
about
part
this
4.
forever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's do some more work and see what we want to talk about next,
Yeah. Super grateful.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And and I'm going to say this on tape, if you ever want to take this interview down, you always have my 100% support to take care of yourself.
I'm a hell yes.
Yeah. And thanks for letting me be part of your team.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Be well, and I will see you in about a month.
That's right. I'm excited.
All right. Mwah! And to everybody at home, thanks for sticking with us. And we hope you'll join us again. Me, Judy, whoever shows up next. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to comment, pose a question, or learn more about the guests often featured on the show, visit us at intimacylabpodcast.com. Please also take a moment to review us on your favorite podcast app. It's one of the best ways to show your support. As for me, you can find out more about my work at meetmichellerenee.com, as well as on most social medias at meetmichellerenee. Let's connect again soon.